You're earning $80,000 a year. On paper, that's a solid income. You've done the responsible things, you avoided reckless spending, you saved where you could. Now you're thinking, okay, maybe it's time to buy a home. So one random night, probably later than you should be awake, you open Zillow. And that's when reality hits. Every house that doesn't look like it belongs in a renovation horror show is priced at $400,000 or more. The kitchen still has those glossy laminate countertops straight out of 2004. The carpet, that tired beige color that says this was last updated when DVDs were popular. There's fake wood paneling in the basement that hasn't been stylish since dial-up internet, and somehow the listing confidently calls it a charming starter home. Meanwhile, the bank tells you you're pre-approved. Your real estate agent is enthusiastic. Your parents keep asking when you're going to stop throwing money away on rent. So what's the issue? Here's the issue. You don't actually afford these houses. Not in a way that doesn't quietly turn the next decade of your life into a constant financial balancing act. And the wild part? No one involved in selling you that house has any reason to warn you about this. Now, today, we're going to do something the housing industry doesn't love. We're going to calculate what your salary realistically buys, not what a lender says you qualify for, but what you can genuinely afford without living stressed, stretched, and one emergency away from panic. Let's start with some uncomfortable math. The current median household income in the U.S. is roughly $83,000. That sounds middle class, stable, reasonable. The kind of income where owning a normal house in a normal neighborhood should feel attainable. Except the median home price is around $415,000. So we're expecting households earning about $84,000 to purchase homes that cost 5 times their annual income. Historically, that number was closer to 3 times income. 3 times income is tight but manageable. 5 times income? That's pressure baked into the system. Yet everyone keeps acting like this is normal. The mortgage broker says you're approved, a YouTuber tells you to house hack, your college friend just closed on a place, so you start wondering, what's wrong with you? Nothing. The problem is how the word affordable is being used. There's a guideline in personal finance called the 28% rule. It says your total housing expenses, mortgage, property taxes, insurance, HOA, shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. Banks use a different benchmark. They'll approve you as long as your total debt-to-income ratio stays under 43%. That includes housing, car payments, student loans, credit cards, everything. And here's the part most people never hear. There's a massive difference between what a bank will approve and what allows you to live comfortably. The bank's goal is simple. Make sure you don't default immediately. They don't factor in lifestyle. They don't factor in stress. They don't factor in whether you can still save, invest, or sleep peacefully. They care that you keep sending payments for 30 years. That 43% threshold, it's not a comfort guideline, it's the upper edge of sustainable financial strain. Let's walk through real numbers. Say you buy a $400,000 home, which is below the national median. You manage to put down 10% or $40,000. That probably took years. Now you borrow $360,000 at around 6% interest. Principal and interest, roughly $2,150 per month. But that's just the starting point. Property taxes, let's estimate $450 per month. Homeowners insurance, about $300. PMI, because you didn't put 20% down, another $275. Maintenance, using the 1% rule, that's $4,000 per year or about $333 per month. Add everything together. Your real monthly housing cost isn't $2,150, it's about $3,500. Now apply the 28% rule. To comfortably afford $3,500 in monthly housing, you'd need to earn around $150,000 per year. But the bank might approve you with income closer to $98,000. That's more than a $50,000 gap between approved and financially secure. And only about 20% of households earn $150,000 or more, which means the majority of households cannot comfortably afford a $400,000 home, even though that's below the median price. That's not dramatic, it's arithmetic. Now imagine a household earning $80,000 combined. After taxes, that becomes roughly $4,600 per month take-home. If housing costs them around $3,100 to $3,500, that leaves maybe $1,100 to $1,500 for everything else. Utilities, groceries, gas, car insurance, student loans, healthcare. There's no margin. A car repair becomes credit card debt. An HVAC replacement becomes financing. A roof leak becomes a crisis. That's what being house poor looks like. You own the house, but financially, it owns you. Now compare that to a household earning $200,000. They buy a $500,000 home with 20% down, no PMI, monthly housing maybe around $3,700. That's roughly 22% of their income. They can still invest, they can still build savings, they can absorb surprises. That's what comfortable looks like, and it requires being near the top income tiers. Now add geography. That same $500,000 buys completely different realities depending on where you live. In San Jose, $500,000 might get you a small condo with strict HOA rules, limited parking, and neighbors close enough to hear your phone vibrate. In LA, you're likely looking at a modest one-bedroom in a dense neighborhood, not a dream home, just a foothold. In Austin, that price forces a decision: live downtown in a smaller space or move further out and get something newer and larger. In Atlanta, $500,000 might secure a four-bedroom house in a solid school district. In Cleveland, it could buy a spacious historic home in a prime area. Same country, same currency, wildly different outcomes. The housing market isn't broken evenly, it's distorted differently based on supply constraints, job markets, zoning laws, and migration patterns. Now let's address something emotional: your parents. They bought a house at your age. They remind you of it. What they often don't realize is they were operating in a completely different economic framework. In 1980, a median home price was roughly 3 times median household income. Today, it's closer to 5 times. That difference changes everything. Yes, interest rates in the early 80s were extremely high, sometimes above 15%, but the purchase price relative to income was lower. They could realistically save a down payment in a few years, and when interest rates eventually fell, they refinanced. You can refinance interest. You cannot refinance the price you paid. That's permanent. Now add modern realities. Student loans are common, car payments are significantly higher, insurance costs are rising, healthcare premiums continue increasing. The financial baseline is heavier before you even consider a mortgage. And here's another overlooked factor: mobility. When you stretch financially for a home, you reduce flexibility. Switching jobs becomes harder. Relocating for opportunity becomes expensive. Selling a house isn't free. Agent commissions, closing costs, moving expenses, it all adds friction. That friction can quietly cost you career growth. Now let's talk about hidden ownership costs, because the mortgage payment is the surface layer. Water heaters don't last forever. Roofs eventually fail. HVAC systems break, usually at the worst possible time. Driveways crack, appliances age.
These are not maybe expenses. They are guaranteed over time. The 1% maintenance rule is often optimistic. Some years will cost far more. Then there's homeowners insurance. Premiums have risen dramatically in recent years. In certain states, insurance alone rivals a car payment. And unlike your mortgage, insurance costs are not fixed. They increase. Property taxes also rise. They rarely go down. Even if your home doesn't appreciate much, your tax assessment often does. Now let's revisit debt, because this is where many buyers get blindsided. Every $250 in monthly debt payments reduces your mortgage qualification power significantly. A $500 car payment and $300 student loan payment can lower how much house you qualify for by tens of thousands of dollars. You might feel like you earn enough, but your existing obligations silently reduce your buying capacity. And then there's the down payment. A 20% down payment on a $415,000 home is over $80,000. For many households, saving that amount takes years, sometimes a decade. Meanwhile, home prices continue rising gradually. It can feel like trying to hit a moving target. Now let's talk about the housing market outlook. Many people are waiting for a crash, a dramatic collapse that resets affordability. But current projections from major forecasters suggest modest growth or stabilization, not a dramatic crash. Why? Because most current homeowners locked in low mortgage rates. If they sell, they would need to purchase at higher rates, so they stay put. That keeps inventory low. Low inventory supports prices. It becomes a feedback loop. Supply remains tight. Prices remain elevated. Meanwhile, mortgage rates may ease slightly, but a return to ultra-low pandemic-era rates is unlikely in the near term. And here's something that surprises people. In many major metro areas, renting is currently cheaper than owning. In numerous markets, the average mortgage payment exceeds rent by 30% or more. In some high-cost cities, buying costs nearly double renting. That doesn't mean renting is perfect. It means the math isn't as simple as rent is throwing money away. Renting can provide flexibility, lower maintenance stress, lower upfront costs. The break-even timeline for buying, where owning becomes financially advantageous compared to renting, can be 7 to 15 years in expensive cities. Most first-time buyers don't stay in their first home that long. Now let's be direct. If you earn less than $140,000 and you're considering a $500,000 house, you need to pause. Not because you're incapable, but because long-term pressure compounds. Financial stress doesn't always show up immediately. It builds quietly, month after month, year after year. You have options. You can relocate to a lower-cost region. You can buy smaller. You can consider a duplex and rent out a portion. You can continue renting and focus on increasing income. There is no award for buying a house that consumes half your income. There is no medal for being house poor. You are not failing. The system has changed. Home ownership, which once aligned naturally with middle-class income, now requires significantly higher earnings in many regions. A $500,000 home is not a modest starter property in today's math. It often requires upper-tier income to own comfortably. The real question is not, can I technically qualify? It's, will this decision expand my life or compress it? Because housing shapes everything. Where you live, how much risk you can take, whether you can switch careers, whether you can start a business, whether one unexpected expense becomes a crisis. When half your income is committed to housing, your flexibility shrinks, and flexibility is power. Real wealth is not just square footage, it's margin, it's breathing room in your budget. It's the ability to invest consistently, to build emergency savings, to sleep without financial anxiety. A mortgage approval is not validation, it's a stress threshold. Just because you're approved does not mean you're positioned comfortably. You are not behind. You are not irresponsible. You are navigating a housing environment where asset prices moved faster than wages, and that gap hasn't closed. So before signing anything, ask yourself one final question. If prices stagnate for a decade, does this still make sense? If appreciation doesn't rescue the numbers, does the payment still feel manageable? If the answer is no, that's not fear.
That's clarity. The goal isn't to impress anyone with a purchase. The goal is long-term stability, freedom, optionality. Because at the end of the day, the bank profits either way. You're the one living with the commitment. And sometimes the smartest financial decision isn't stretching, it's strengthening your position first. That's not weakness, that's discipline, that's strategic patience. And in this market, patience might be your most valuable asset.